On January 15, 1955, The Benny Hill Show first appeared on British television and immediately caused a storm. The programme delivered chaotic chase scenes that made hundreds of millions of viewers from the US, Australia, and even the Soviet Union burst into laughter. Yet behind the seemingly harmless laughter lay a fierce storm of controversy. Many believed that the show was in fact an insult to women, reducing them to mere decorative objects in absurdly sexual sketches. Feminist groups branded Benny Hill a cultural criminal, while the British press mocked him as the national embarrassment. What turned a comedy genius into the most controversial figure in television history? And what are the darkest truths about Benny Hill, from his extreme frugality to his lonely death that went unnoticed? Here are 20 shocking secrets about the Benny Hill Show that few audiences have ever heard. 20. In the UK, the show was harshly criticised. At its peak, the Benny Hill Show was not just a television programme, it was a global phenomenon. With its silent comedy style, frantic rhythm, and Benny Hill's ridiculous chases, the show transcended language barriers and conquered more than 140 countries. In the US, it ranked among the most popular TV shows of the 1980s, with some episodes reaching over 100 million global viewers. In Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, the show aired during prime time. In South America, Hill was hailed as a cultural icon, and even in the Soviet Union, despite strict censorship, pirated tapes of the show circulated in secret. Yet the bitter irony lay in Hill's own homeland. While the world celebrated him as Britain's most successful television export, earning him more wealth than many Hollywood comedians, the British press scorned him as the national embarrassment. What millions abroad found hilarious domestic critics dismissed as vulgar and lowbrow. 19. The show almost never existed because critic Ronald Waldman doubted Benny Hill's humour. While many comedians in the 1950s mocked television as a passing fad, Benny Hill saw the future. Armed with a treasure trove of sketch ideas, Hill wrote hundreds of scripts and approached the BBC eager to test his luck. But fate played a cruel trick when the first door he knocked on was opened by a familiar face, Ronald Waldman, a renowned producer and television critic. Years earlier, Waldman had written a scathing review that crushed Hill's budding career, dismissing him as lacking in comedic personality and not funny at all. This time, standing before the very man who once killed his hopes, Hill had only one desire: to force Waldman to swallow his bitter words. And the chance came. Waldman read through Hill's freshly written sketches, witty parodies packed with rhythm and vivid imagery. To Hill's surprise, the same critic who once ridiculed him now burst into laughter, immediately changing his tune. Forgetting his past remarks, Waldman offered Hill his own BBC television show on the spot. That was the turning point. From a struggling comedian, Benny Hill officially stepped into his golden era. 18. The shocking decision to cancel the show. In 1989, while audiences were still laughing at his legendary chase scenes, a devastating shock struck. The Benny Hill Show was abruptly cancelled by Thames Television. After more than 2 decades of global dominance, the programme was killed off in a cold meeting. John Howard Davies, head of Thames's entertainment division, looked Benny Hill in the eye and said, "It's time to stop." The man who had once made millions laugh sat in silence. The reasons: declining domestic ratings, high production costs, and Hill's visible fatigue. In truth, the show remained a phenomenon in the US, Australia, South America, and even thrived underground in the Soviet Union. But in Britain, Hill was branded outdated, condemned by the press as obscene, and relentlessly attacked by feminist groups for reducing women to jokes. The more international audiences adored him, the more critics at home despised him. Ultimately, this clash buried a show once considered unbeatable. 17. The show became a prime target of feminism. In the 1980s, as the feminist movement gained momentum in Britain, the Benny Hill Show became a lightning rod for criticism over its portrayal of women. The sketches often featured comical chase scenes with women with Benny Hill either chasing or being chased by young, scantily clad women known as Hill's Angels. Although Hill insisted the scenes were purely for entertainment and not intended to offend many, saw them as degrading to women and reflective of sexist attitudes in society. Feminist activists like Sheila Jeffreys publicly condemned the show for objectifying women. Meanwhile, television critic Ben Elton harshly denounced Hill, calling him a dirty old man ripping the clothes off young women and chasing them around the park. Despite Hill's defense, the criticism only grew stronger, cementing the show as a key target of feminist outrage. 16. Using children to soften the show's image. Throughout his career, Benny Hill often faced criticism that his program was too adult with risque humour and bold satire. In response, Hill devised a clever strategy bringing children into his sketches. For him, the innocent laughter and natural charm of kids not only softened the controversy, but also created a refreshing contrast to his bawdy humour. Their presence made the Benny Hill show more approachable and less vulnerable to harsh criticism. Instead of hiring professional child actors, who were often trained to laugh on cue, Hill preferred using the children of crew members. He believed their genuine, spontaneous and sometimes unpredictable reactions added authenticity. This approach made many sketches more lively, as audiences could feel the natural spontaneity of each moment. 15. Benny Hill lived with extreme frugality. Despite becoming one of the world's most famous TV stars, Benny Hill chose a life of shocking simplicity. He never bought a mansion or a luxury apartment in London, renting modest flats for decades. For over 26 years, he lived in a double apartment in Kensington before moving to Teddington, near the studio where he worked. A surprising detail, he never owned a car. Though trained as a driver in the army and knowledgeable about mechanics, Hill preferred walking or taking the bus around London. He often shopped for his own groceries, cooked for himself, and never hired domestic help. Even in clothing, he bought second-hand items or patched up worn garments, a habit that baffled friends and colleagues alike. One striking example of his stinginess was gluing the soles of his shoes instead of buying new ones. This habit highlighted his aversion to unnecessary spending, even on basic needs. Hill could have easily afforded a personal assistant or even a team of them. Instead, Londoners often spotted the famous comedian running errands by himself, hunting for bargains. He was known to shop only during sales, moving from store to find the best deal. 14. 3 black and white episodes that never aired. In the early 1970s, an unexpected twist resulted in several episodes of The Benny Hill Show being filmed entirely in black and white ITV's colour. Technicians went on strike from November 1970 to February 1971, refusing to operate the colour equipment even though it was available. As a result, 3 special episodes were broadcast during this period in black and white, standing out oddly in television's colour era. These episodes were never rebroadcast in the UK and never aired in the US, turning them into a mystery phenomenon in the show's history. However, the black and white episodes did reach international audiences. They were replayed in Australia and included in fan collections such as the Benny Hill Annuals The Ultimate Collection, released by Via Vision Entertainment. This compilation covered episodes from 1969 to 1989, including the 3 strike-era specials, offering modern audiences a rare glimpse of Benny Hill in a vintage style never before seen on American screens. 13. The final episode aired on May 1st, 1989, but special episodes followed. On May 1st, 1989, The Benny Hill Show officially closed its 34-year run with a special episode titled Tales of the Unexpected. This was the last time Benny Hill appeared in the official programme produced by Thames Television. In this finale, audiences were treated to a series of classic sketches, the Hill Angels spoofing the openings of hit TV shows like The Bill Boone and Tales of the Unexpected, as well as satirical comedy such as The Good Guys set around bumbling police officers. Benny Hill even revisited one of his most beloved sketches, Pepys's Diary, before ending with a fishing trip alongside the Little Angels, which spiraled into chaos when they got tangled up in a botched prison escape. However, goodbye did not mean the end. After 1989, Benny Hill still left behind a few memorable specials such as Benny Hill, the World's Favourite Clown, which aired in January 1st, 1991, and the unfinished project Benny Hill's World Tour, which was intended to bring his characters and sketches to the countries where he was most loved. Did you feel emotional watching Benny Hill's final episodes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 12. Famous for parodying celebrities. The Benny Hill Show was famous for its fearless parodies of anyone and everyone. One of its most iconic sketches was Murder on the Oregon Express, inspired by Agatha Christie's detective novel Murder on the Orient Express. Here, Hill simultaneously portrayed several well-known detectives such as Hercule Poirot, Ironside, MacLeod, Cannon, and Kojak. On a train full of conspiracies and bloody crimes, each character was exaggerated to absurdity. Ironside so majestic that he rolled straight into the toilet as the train shook. Kojak dramatising every minor detail to the point of nonsense, while MacLeod acted with over-the-top cowboy antics in situations where they were completely unnecessary. Beyond these iconic figures, Hill also lampooned hit American TV series from the 1970s and 1980s. For example, Husky and Starch blatantly parodied Starsky and Hutch, turning the cool cop duo into clumsy, bumbling fools. Similarly, the sketch The B-Team spoofed the popular The A-Team, but instead of elite fighters, Hill's group consisted of oddballs and misfits who caused disasters rather than solved problems. These parodies not only piqued audience curiosity, but also highlighted the humorous gap between heroic TV images and the messy reality of everyday life. In addition to series parodies, Benny Hill cleverly mocked celebrities in popular culture. He transformed Johnny and Fanny Craddock into Johnny and Cranny Faddock Barry Norman, into Barry Normal, and Clive James into Cinema with Clive James. 11. The mastermind behind the entire show. Benny Hill was not only the face of The Benny Hill Show, but also its creative mastermind. Over 90% of the scripts, sketches, and musical numbers were written by Hill himself. He even directed the settings, music, and staging of each scene. From the playful music to the iconic chase sequences that closed each show, everything bore his unmistakable creative stamp. Beyond the show that defined his career, Benny Hill also left his mark in several famous films. Audiences saw him in Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines 1965, as the toy maker in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang 1968, and as Professor Peach in The Blockbuster. The Italian Job 1909. Even outside the world of television comedy, Hill proved himself a versatile actor, shifting from goofy slapstick roles to colourful cinematic characters. 10. Benny Hill proposed many times but was never accepted. Throughout his life, Benny Hill never married despite having every means to do so. On screen, he was the eternal playboy, always chasing after women in endless comic pursuits. But off-screen, he was the opposite, shy, reserved, and astonishingly lonely. He proposed marriage at least 3 times during his lifetime. One of the women he proposed to was actress Annette Andre in the early 1960s. Yet each time the answer was rejection. Some believed Hill was too eccentric to settle into family life, while others thought he was so consumed by work that there was no room for love. He often admired women from a distance, offering quiet affection, but rarely mustering the courage to go further. Some anecdotes suggest that Hill harboured silent crushes on women who never reciprocated. His shyness, combined with his odd personality and reclusive lifestyle, caused his chances at love to fade quietly away. Family life had lacked affection from early on, and after his mother's death in 1996, Benny Hill's loneliness grew even deeper. Instead of living in a lavish mansion like many stars of his era, he chose modest London flats, walked or took buses everywhere, and shopped like any ordinary man. The fortune he amassed from worldwide fame was never used to build a home, but remained quietly tucked away, much like his private self. Friends and colleagues often said that this void in his personal life drove Hill to immerse himself endlessly in work. He wrote, performed, directed, filling the silence with the laughter of millions worldwide. But even that laughter couldn't erase the emptiness he felt when he returned to his small apartment with only his own reflection for company. Many believe that this loneliness was the greatest tragedy of a comedian who seemed to have it all. 9. Broadcast for 35 years. The Benny Hill Show first premiered on January 15, 1955, on the BBC, launching a journey that lasted 34 years before ending on May 1, 1989. During that time, the show changed homes several times, moving from BBC to ATV, and finally settling at Thames Television, where episodes became more elaborate specials. In total, there were over 100 official episodes and numerous specials, making Benny Hill one of the most familiar faces on British television. The show's peak came in the early 1970s, when it drew over 21 million viewers in the UK, numbers that forced competitors to tip their hats. Benny Hill even won a BAFTA for writing and became a global phenomenon, with the show being broadcast in the US well into the 1990s. 8. Music was a highlight of the show. Music was an inseparable part of the Benny Hill Show, and the piece most closely tied to it was Yakety Sax, composed in 1963 by Boots Randolph and James Q. Rich. It began as a folk-inspired saxophone single, but once Hill chose it as the background music for his fast-paced, silent chase scenes, it became an instant icon. Audiences only had to hear the first few notes to imagine chaotic chases, pratfalls, and exaggerated comic antics. Beyond background music, Benny Hill also made his mark with his own musical endeavours. In 1971, he released the comic song Ernie the Fastest Milkman in the West, telling the story of a speedy milkman caught in a love triangle. What seemed like a silly novelty track unexpectedly became a hit. It soared to number 1 on the UK charts and even claimed the coveted Christmas number 1 that year. The success of Ernie proved that Hill was not only a master of physical comedy, but could also make audiences laugh through music. Did these two pieces of music leave an impression on you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 7. A family of clowns. Few fans know that Benny Hill was born into a family with a performing tradition. Both his father and grandfather were travelling circus clowns, bringing laughter to audiences at small theatres and fairs. Although his father later ran a medical equipment shop, the memories of circus shows and the clumsy yet charming humour of his family instilled in Hill a special passion for comedy. This environment helped him realise early on that laughter had the power to chase away sorrow, no matter the circumstances. Growing up, Hill often accompanied his family to theatres where he witnessed variety acts, pantomime and street performers. These experiences became his first school, teaching him how to observe audience reactions and how a simple, clumsy move or a silly facial expression could erupt into laughter. To young Hill clowns were not just jokers, but masters of emotional control, a craft he later turned into his own art form. However, inheriting the clown's bloodline did not guarantee an easy career. Before success, Hill worked numerous odd jobs, from milk delivery to sales to backstage theatre management. Each job gave him new perspectives and details that he later poured into his performances. Do you enjoy Benny Hill's style of humour? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 6. Hill's Angels became the show's icon. Do you still remember Hill's Angels? The dancers regarded as the visual symbol of the program, often appearing in the comic chase finales, musical sketches, and humorous, cheeky dance routines. Interestingly, Hill's Angels was never a fixed troupe like other bands or dance groups. Their number usually ranged from 7 to 8 per episode, and the lineup changed frequently from season to season. However, a few faces became familiar and especially beloved by fans such as Sue Upton and Louise English. The Hill's Angels performances were often meticulously choreographed, ranging from light, playful dances with mischievous costumes to shocking numbers like the 1982 Invisible Striptease. This unique mix of sensuality, wit, and creativity made them a distinctive highlight in the history of British television comedy. Do you remember this iconic dance troupe? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 5. Despite criticism, Hill influenced countless comedians. Benny Hill's fast-paced, precise, and relentless comedy style not only made audiences laugh out loud, but also paved the way for an entire generation of comedians. Shows like Saturday Night Live directly borrowed his visual comedy ideas and chase sequences, which Hill had turned into a trademark. Even Monty Python, famous for absurdity and satire, openly acknowledged his talent. John Cleese once praised Hill's comic timing as genius in the field of near-visual comedy. Hill's influence spread worldwide. In America, Jim Carrey considered him a major inspiration, while Eddie Murphy once mimicked Hill's chases and signature sketches in his stand-up routines. In France, comedy shows directly copied the chase scenes that Hill had invented. His impact even reached beyond the Western world. Animated shows like The Simpsons constantly referenced Hill-style gags, and Asian comedy was clearly influenced by his chase scenes, the blend of music with action. Despite criticism of his content as vulgar or outdated, experts and critics alike admitted that Hill's editing timing and the fusion of music with movement were exceptionally rare, creating a comedy style that was nearly impossible to replicate. 4. Hill was very generous to others. After performances, Hill often gave cash to his co-stars, especially young actresses just starting their careers, helping them get a foothold in the industry. He frequently wrote personal letters of encouragement showing genuine care for his colleagues. His generosity wasn't limited to fellow performers. He also gave money to crew members, sometimes surprising them with unexpected bonuses. On one occasion, Hill bought a car for a sick friend, showing deep concern for others. He also supported charities, often anonymously, never seeking publicity for his good deeds. This stood in stark contrast to his public image, surprising and moving many people. One of the most memorable stories about Hill's generosity was his promise to leave his fortune to close friends. According to Sue Upton, one of Hill's longtime co-stars, he once said, "You don't have to worry about money. I've left you something in my will." However, after Hill's death, the only official will found left the majority of his fortune to his family, with whom he was not particularly close. This sparked controversy about whether another unofficial will existed, one that would have left his estate to his friends and colleagues. 3. Benny Hill's death shocked the world. On April 18, 1992, the comedy world was stunned by the news of Benny Hill's death at age 68. He passed away in his small Teddington flat, London, just weeks after refusing coronary bypass surgery, despite a minor heart attack and kidney failure. His body was discovered 2 days later, quietly seated in his familiar chair in front of the still-lit TV. The scene shocked the UK. A man who brought laughter to hundreds of millions worldwide had died in absolute silence, with no wife, no children, no one by his side. Hill's legacy made his death even more tragic. With assets exceeding £7 million, he lived as an ordinary, humble man, making many believe he was not wealthy. The only will he made in 1961 left assets to his parents, who had long since passed away. Ultimately, his enormous fortune was distributed to distant relatives he barely knew, Close collaborators like Sue Upton and Henry McGee were rumoured to have been included in a personal will, but it was never officially recognised. His funeral in Southampton brought together comedians, colleagues and fans to bid farewell to a legend who once brought British comedy to the world. Yet the quietness of Hill's final days left a poignant mark on the public. He had been the UK's most successful export TV star, yet he passed away in solitude unknown to most. Do you feel sympathy for Benny Hill's life? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2. Walking as a travel preference. Even as a famous millionaire, Hill never owned a car, though he had a driver's license. Instead of driving or taking taxis, he often walked even long distances across London to work or appointments. This was not only a frugal habit, but also a lifestyle choice where he felt comfortable. International travel was one of the few luxuries Hill allowed himself. He particularly enjoyed France, especially Marseille, where he could relax in outdoor cafes, use public transport, and remain incognito. He spoke fluent French and had basic knowledge of other European languages like German, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch, enough for travel purposes. 1. Benny Hill still could not rest in peace. On the night of October 4th, 1992, just 6 months after Benny Hill's death, a shocking event occurred at Hollybrook Cemetery, Southampton, where he was buried. Grave robbers dug up his grave, believing he had been buried with large amounts of gold, silver, and valuable jewellery. In reality, the coffin was empty. The robbers damaged the coffin lid, but fortunately, Hill's body was unharmed. To prevent similar incidents in the future, cemetery staff quickly filled the grave and placed a 1-foot-thick concrete slab on top. This strong measure was meant to protect the resting place of one of Britain's comedy legends. Today, Benny Hill's grave remains at Hollybrook Cemetery, Southampton, and has become a pilgrimage site for his fans. The concrete slab continues to protect the grave, ensuring he rests in peace after previous disturbances. Benny Hill was not only a comedy legend, but also a complex, contradictory individual. He created The Benny Hill Show, which had a global impact, inspiring Jim Carrey, Eddie Murphy, and Monty Python. Yet while the world celebrated his talent, his homeland, the UK, once criticised him and even considered him outdated and offensive. So, do you enjoy The Benny Hill Show? Do you see Benny Hill as a comedic genius or a controversial figure? Thank you for following the 20 shocking facts about Benny Hill and his iconic show. If you enjoy behind-the-scenes stories and want to discover more bizarre truths, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch the next videos.